Communication 920, Audit Report Number 2018-01, Cash Handling at County of Hawaii Mass Transit Agency, from Legislative Auditor Bonnie S. Nims, dated April 30th, 2018, transmitting the above report in accordance with Hawaii County Charter Section 3-18D2. The purpose of the audit was to determine whether cash handling internal controls at Mass Transit are adequate and effective to ensure that revenue is properly controlled and deposits are timely and accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Please, a motion to file Communication 920.
So move.
It's been moved by Ms. Leroy, seconded by Mr. Richards. And council members, we have in the room, we have our auditor, Bonnie Nims, and her staff, Maxine Pacheco and Mr. Shibata. If you folks want to come up. Good morning. So I believe we're going to ask you to do a brief description of your report, and then I'm going to open it up for questions from the council members. If you can introduce yourself.
Bonnie Nims, Legislative Auditor. And
Good morning.
The audit of cash handling at Mass Transit was done in part because of our annual audit plan and also Resolution 218-17, which was passed last year in June. The audit, as the county clerk mentioned, is to look at the cash handling internal controls over bus fare and taxi coupons to determine if they are safeguarded and deposited timely and intact. So our audit took place during the fall and winter of 2017 and beginning of 2018, and it included interviewing staff, doing some transaction testing, walkthroughs of the process, and we found numerous internal control weaknesses. There was lack of safeguarding of assets, lack of monitoring. The internal control, the written policies and procedures, while they had been implemented, weren't complete. We also did testing and determined that cash was not being deposited timely, which the county policy is 2 days. Best practices recommends 24 hours. So it still wasn't even meeting the 2-day county requirement. While we were on site, we realized that there was a bunch of money in the safe that had not been deposited. So we did manage to do an unannounced cash count and counted nearly $30,000 in cash that had been there, some of it since July of 2017. Three of us spent 5 days counting all the money. We did ensure that it was deposited subsequently to our account, but it did bring forward a lot of the internal control weaknesses that there's currently, with the internal controls the way they are, there's no way to determine if all the money that was paid by the bus riders was actually receipted. We were able to determine that what was receipted was deposited, but we can't determine the completeness of that revenue. So based on all the internal control weaknesses, we have 30 recommendations that we made to Mass Transit. In general, they agreed with the recommendations, and I know they've already taken many steps to implement them.
Thank you very much. Council members.
We went through an exercise last budget and saw some concerns in that department. And as the council initiated the resolution for this audit, it was concerning. But what I'm really happy about is everything is now on the table. We understand the internal controls, the weaknesses there, how to improve the process and improve those cash handling measures. We have a mass transit plan coming forward. I actually just want to yield and hear what some of my other colleagues thought about this audit, because Bonnie, it was so comprehensive and detailed. I cannot thank you enough. And it really was my goal to use this as a tool to help the department. And so I'm going to yield. I read this report probably 5 times. I read it so fast the first time because there was just so much information there. But I just want to yield right now and hear what my other colleagues have to say about this audit and how we can use this as a tool to help the department going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liloy. Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Nims, for bringing this forward. As Councilwoman Liloy stated, last year we had concerns about mass transit, which prompted and then coming forward. And I have to agree, I haven't read it 5 times, but I've read it a couple times. The volume of information here is excellent. Thank you so much. I hear that you said all the funds that were receipted were deposited. But as I read through, and again, I read it several times, there were pouches or envelopes, whatever, that either had trips but no money, or had money but no trip sheet in there, correct? And all of these are, how do you make sense of that? Because you have nothing to tie it to. So I can fully appreciate that, which is, again, highlights the concern the council had a year ago in dealing with mass transit. And we need mass transit without question, but we need a well-managed mass transit. And so with that, no point in conjecture on that stuff, but are there protocols in place that I assume when you're bringing in cash, you're supposed to sign in? It's kind of like a till for a grocery store. You clock in, clock out. Are those procedures, were they in place, or are they in place now?
They were not in place at the time of our audit. They are, at least Mass Transit asserts that they are in place now. We have not gone back out to confirm their assertion, and we will during a follow-up audit, but they have asserted that they have corrected those.
And then what you just stated there, follow-up audit, is that a standard portion of auditing, or is this something that's going to ask for a bit more auditing?
It depends. The answer is yes, it is pretty standard. We will not know until we get out there if additional auditing is necessary.
Okay, yeah, I just, again, like I stated, we do need mass transit, but the amount of funds and the amount of cash is very unsettling for me. And at this point, I'm going to yield as well, because I want to hear the other council members.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Ms. Eoff, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually thinking along the same lines as Mr. Richards about the follow-up. I mean, it would really be helpful to know, like, what improvements have been made in a month later and 2 months later, and I don't know how we can either request that, or if you can just give us a follow-up on your own behalf, or does there need to be some kind of formal request? Because it would really help us going forward to know steps being taken to correct the suggested.
As far as a monthly follow-up, that would be pretty time-consuming for my staff. I'm happy to work with Mass Transit to find out the status, and maybe less frequently than monthly. I'm happy to submit a status report of where we're at on this.
I don't know how often, but I just think what we need is to know that there is improvements being made on a regular basis till we get to our goal.
Sorry, that might be something that Mass Transit could provide.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank
I
you.
know it was time-consuming, and you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eoff. Any other council members?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Nims, for this report. It's very eye-opening for everyone, including the department, and we learn best from our mistakes, as they say. So hopefully this will be a good learning experience for the department. And we do have a new personnel there, so she can't really own this particular audit since it wasn't during her tenure. But we do, it does point to some serious management issues in terms of not the cash handling, and not only that, but being able to correlate the data from our revenues with our the number of rides provided so that we have some kind of metric as to who we're providing rides to and how long those rides are and et cetera. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I really appreciate the way you've laid out the recommendations. And one of which is training. So I hope that all of the recommendations get considered by the department as we move forward with this, because as we all know, our current system, our current bus system is far, far, far from adequate. And so we want to be able to provide for the citizens on this island. So I wish I was better prepared and had read it 5 times like Miss Liloy, but the last 2 weeks have been a little busy in my district, so I wasn't able to do that. But I am absorbing the information, and it is of concern, but I think the department will be able to use this information effectively and productively in terms of moving forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the detail of this audit booklet that you have here. I just have one question about one of the things in here in particular. It says that there was a net overage for, this is on page 15, a net overage of $1,682. More money was deposited than the calculated revenue for ridership. Is that just for December, or is that for the entire year?
That is just for December.
Okay. And how often was there an overage?
Every bus, let's see, every cash bag may contain several bus runs or routes. We calculate it based on cash bag and calculated out the ridership based on the tally sheets that were included with that cash. So to answer your question, it would happen on multiple cash bags. Probably the majority of cash bags did have an overage. And a lot of people may say, well, great, it's an overage. Well, that's just as concerning to an auditor as an underage, because that means that the records aren't accurate.
Right. Yeah, I get that. But that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggles. Mr. Chung, go ahead.
Thank you, Bonnie and Maxine, for your good work. I'd like to call up our current and maybe former mass transit directors, just for their thoughts and comments, if I could. What are your thoughts after having read the audit?
Yeah, press your button. Okay.
Good morning. Okay. Solerangis, Mass Transit Agency Administrator. Yes, it's been an eye-opening, really looking at this document prepared by the Legislative Auditor's Office. We certainly appreciate this opportunity to understand where the inefficiencies and the inadequate handling of the cash handlings has taken place. And we are very serious, and we are prioritizing this on a daily basis. This is one of the items that you will see if you go to the conference room. So one of the main items there, cash handling. There are various recommendations as well, over 30. And they are dealing basically with segregation of duties, the processes, the policies, and how to maintain the physical safeguard of our assets. So we have taken this into full account, made sure that staff understand the policies, how it works, and to make sure that no matter really what, actually we are doing it, this, including myself, is a learning experience, to maintain the number of people that is required, to have adequate QC process, to make sure that we are taking full account of the monies that are being collected, to make sure with the contractor, as I say, you're a big part of this effort as well, because we need for you to come with the money every day, or develop a mechanism and have complete thrift sheets, because that's an issue as well. If you don't have complete thrift sheets, it will be very hard to maintain the level of accuracy with the money that is being collected, so you wouldn't be able really to understand. There will be discrepancies as mentioned by Ms. Nims. But this is a serious matter. We are taking it very seriously. This is a priority for the Mass Transit Agency. We understand how critical it is because it's not only for internal control purposes, but as well for us to show how accountable we are for these public funds, that we have a mechanism in place, that we are fully accountable, of course, and that each one of the members in my agency is aware of how important it is for us to maintain accurate records. So, I mean, without this, the whole system collapses in a way. So this is a main issue for us, and we are addressing it as recommended. And obviously, right now, we are doing it within the extent of our resources. We have created plans in case something happened in the agency. There are certain comments there. Now we make sure, regardless, there is a schedule, so we always have 2 people to count the money regardless of what's taking place. That's one example. And then obviously, if at some point the resources are available to us, most of these issues will go away if we are able to have automated fare collection system. So the technology is there, is being used nationwide, it's not tremendously expensive. Hopefully we'll be able to do something in the next fiscal year to secure a system, probably from Federal Transit Administration, and work with our consultants on how we can combine this technology with the GPS so we could provide additional services as well to our public, our riders. They will understand, it will be a streamlined process for them to pay, for us to maintain accurate records, and for them as well to get information about, for trip planning purposes as well.
You use the phrase or term, within the context of your resources, right? So let me ask both you and former Director Kai, are there any constraints that would prevent or hamper your ability to follow the recommendations of the auditor? You guys are right there on the ground level. Yes. I just would like to know what your perspectives are.
Just briefly, from my experience, I can tell you that now in order to meet the requirements, sometimes I'm there with my team getting the boxes as well as counting the money during the weekend. So, that's we have gotten to that level because if I don't have a commitment for overtime after the hours, we get buses that arrive after 5:30, we stay there. And we are able to go, I will have one of the mechanics or another member to come with me so we can get the money, go to the, in the safe vault and just secure the funds, log all the information. And the same thing, if I don't have enough, like on Friday, I didn't have enough staff members available, I will be counting the money with them as well, which teaches you about the process, and that is not really as simple as people may think. So it's a lengthy process to meet our deadline as well for the process that is actually it's not 2 days, it's 2 business days, just to clarify that point. So we try to keep consistent with all of recommendations that we have received in this document. Okay. So we'll go to that level just to maintain that we are responding, that we are trying the best we can to address these recommendations.
Are systems currently in place to safeguard the integrity of your cash handling process right now? And if not, how long will it take?
Well, right now, briefly, what I can tell you is that as the money comes in, it is taken from the buses, it's put in a safe place. There's always 2 people participating in this process, not just one like in the past. The money,
But that system was in place, though, for
yeah, but the counting of the money, so that's step number 1. Once the money is taken from there to another, our counting cash handling room, you can probably call it. So that room is monitored. We have video surveillance there, so I can monitor the activities from another area and see what's taking place. Mm-hmm. There are always 2 individuals counting the money, 2 in the same room. If there is a need for them to assist with a bus that have come, they will leave the room and they will lock the room. So if money is there, is secure, and we have the video surveillance at the same time. And there's a limited access in terms of the keys because the entire facility was re-key. So it's limited as to, I am the only person with another county employee that have access to the locked room for the monies. So when they need access, they will have to call this third person to open. So it's not like they have they are counting the money and leaving the money in a safe area at the same time.
And what
So
about the depositing of the money?
the depositing is taking place as required.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that when the person that comes to get the money from us, around 2:15, we need to be done with all the money that we have been counting during that day. So that's kind of like the way we are addressing that that recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Have anything to
Tiffany, you
add?
got any comments?
Yeah, so I wanted to mention that, I take full responsibility at the time that this audit occurred. And thank you to Councilmember Leloy for making the recommendation of getting this audit done, because you never know what you're doing wrong until somebody points it out. And the document is very well written, very detailed. And I'm glad that, they just didn't do the audit and say, here, this is it. They came with a lot of good recommendations on how we can move forward to improve our cash handling procedures. And as Director Arangues had mentioned, that we have done a lot of improvements already that has taken place. One of the recommendations that the auditors had suggested was the smart cards, and I believe if we do, of course, it's, funding is always an issue, but that's one of the ways we can reduce the amount of cash we're taking in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. Mr. Kanuha?
Thank you, Ms. Leloy, for starting this process off, and mahalo, Bonnie, and your team for producing this. I'm glad to see that a lot of these measures are being taken care of. I didn't even know where to start with all these recommendations because there's so many. But we use audits as a good thing to make sure that we're handling things right. And this one is it's hard because you're dealing with cash. So hopefully, I just want to get the confidence from the department that these recommendations are going to be fulfilled. That's what I want to get from you guys. And it's hard because over the course of the last several months, there's been all these problems with mass transit. This is just another thing that we're having to deal with. So I not only myself, the community needs to have that confidence from you guys that these things are going to be taken care of. So I'll have to wait and see. But I did want to thank Bonnie, you guys, for putting together this thing. It's hard to see that a lot of these controls weren't happening. We should have controls in how to deal with cash handling. We should have all these controls about all this type of stuff. I know, Tiffany, you said you didn't really know, you thought you were handling it right, but certain things like just making sure that the money is secure, that's one of the first things that we need to, that for cash, it's almost, so I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure that we can get the confidence that this is everything's gonna be okay. When you're asking for money to help develop the mass transit system, and then we see, $30,000 being not put in, it's kind of hard, So But, you know, this is a good thing. This audit is a good thing and how to move forward. I just want to make sure that it's handled correctly and the department really steps up and does it right. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. So when was the last time mass transit was audited?
I don't believe our office has ever performed an audit on it.
Okay. That concerns me because that's where we as government failed. So not necessarily, you know, I know part of the burden, the percentage of degree of, if everybody wants to point fingers of fault, is our own as well. You look at any organization, medical facilities, any place with cash handling and, you know, income and expenses, everybody normally has an annual audit because that helps the company, organization, or even the CEO, executive director to make sure that things are flowing the way it should be. So part of, I want to say that we're part of the problem because we need to put those kinds of practices in place where we have a high volume of cash coming in, that we should make it a priority to have an annual audit because that helps the department. It doesn't say, hey, the department, you guys are doing so wrong all this time and blah, 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 blah. You know, we got to do right by the departments as a government, county government. So I feel we should have annual audits. I didn't see in here anywhere where we talk about staggering employee hours. And I know that takes a lot of time with working with unions because of what is set in the union contract, but it's not impossible because we did that at Hamakua Health Center as well. When we looked at some of where lost revenue was, we could adjust and we worked with the union to amend the contracts, whatever it takes. But so thank you so much for doing the audit because it now starts to develop a better process. I'd like to see annual audits happen, especially where there's heavy, like volume of a lot of cash being handled in and out. I think I don't know what other department besides DMV or, you know, but I know mass transit. But I would definitely, again, you know, recommend that we put some type of system in place for those departments to help them better manage themselves because, you know, I feel kind of bad for Tiffany Kai, who came into the position and just got slammed with all of this now. And, you know, God bless her for taking the bullet on this. But this is an ongoing for many years now. And this is, I think we as government need to take responsibility for that as well. Thank you.
The results of this audit is very disappointing. It's very discouraging. It's clear that our cash handling system is ineffective. But with that, we have these detailed, very good suggestions that the auditor's office gave us. And we need to do what we can to move forward. And so moving forward, the first recommendation is that we update our cash handling system with an electronic fare box to collect the fares and track the ridership. I was wondering, Administrator, if you could share with us what the cost of this would be and what the timeline is.
You know, we'll have to start, the best way is like a pilot, to understand really how it will work for us because it will be something that new to our riders. So they will have to get used to it in order to implement it system-wide. Now, the cost, there are various companies. I have my research here, just I thought people may ask about that, but there are various companies. They go from the large, like Genfair, a company very well known in the transit industry, to very small systems. So it could vary for something that you go $500,000 and beyond, or it could be something that if you implement as a scalable type of approach, so that means you can grow into that and make it more complex, you can have something that probably around $150,000 to $200,000. But what I'm saying is that will give us the opportunity to see how it works, you know.
Okay, so Let me just ask, I should have asked this first, I'm sorry. Have you identified an electronic fare system?
Yes, I have. I have looked, like I said, Gem Fair. They have various type of devices that allow you to pay various formats. You can use a card, you can use your credit card, you can use your phone, you can use your watch. I mean, it varies. Now, as the more complex the technology or the more user-friendly sometimes, the more expensive it is.
Okay, so I'm getting that you've explored options within a certain provider or a
That's
company.
correct.
But you haven't chose which one we're going to go with yet?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know what the timeline is? Does Mass Transit have a timeline in installing?
Well, there is in the mass transit, obviously, one of the many items there that identified this as a plus for us, of course. But we haven't really gone into the more detailed information as to the specific company costs and all that, because that takes, I mean, I can start that discussion to have more information if that's desired. But at this point, it's been more about the technology and how it can be implemented to a system that is much smaller than the one that they are used to regularly. Because we have just, like 25 vehicles. We expect to have 55. How will that work in our environment? Because obviously, like Councilwoman Lillo is concerned about our return on investment. So we want to make sure that the benefits are something that deserve this type of thing,
My question is whether or not there was actually is there a time that Mass Transit will have these electronic fare systems?
Well, I cannot give you a concrete date, but I can tell you that this will be a priority for the next fiscal year to explore the opportunities, because I already discussed with the Federal Transit Administration about getting some funds used for that specific purpose.
Okay.
Can
Well, it would be great to be updated on the progress of that. Go ahead,
Sure.
Ms. Sims.
Sorry, Bonnie Nims. And just to clarify, that's a process that would have to go out for RFP. So.
First of all, I want to tell Ms. Kai thank you. It takes a lot to own some shortcomings. I really appreciate that. There are 30 recommendations in this audit. And one thing I kind of want to try and get to using this with everybody in the room right here, right now, is something that Ms. Eoff touched upon, is how do we ensure that these recommendations are being met in a timely manner, which then touches upon something Mr. Kanuha just mentioned, which is gaining back the confidences in this department, and then touching upon what Ms. Poindexter talked about is we have a role in this too. Us as council members, we have a duty to ensure that the monies that we're providing to this agency is being spent in an efficient way. And so I'm just going to throw it out there, and maybe this is something that Ms. Ruggles can take on as the chair of the Public Works Committee and Mass Transit, is to begin interfacing with this agency and providing status reports through your committee to indicate to the council members that these recommendations are being met and show us that improvement. That's what the leadership should be doing, both at the agency level and at our committee level. I think it would go a long way for all of us as colleagues to understand what's going on and how we can best help and provide that guidance and provide that leadership. I really started this process as a way to help, and the only way we could figure out how to help is to understand where our shortcomings were. That's my thoughts, Ms. Ruggles, if that's something you can consider as a committee chair for this agency, and provide that kind of maybe status reports working with Ms. Nims, but keeping this department on task to meet these 30 recommendations, I think would go a long way, both ways, from the council to support this agency and for this agency to gain back the confidences, not only with us, but the public at large. I'm going to yield at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leloy. Mr. Richards?
Ms. Kai, I'd like to ask you a question, please. Thanks for coming up, and I do have to agree with Councilwoman Leloy accepting the responsibility. I'm deeply bothered by the cash handling, and that obviously is going on for a long time. How long has that been handled that way? You've been at the agency for quite some time.
Well, I've been with the agency for about a little over 20 years. And over the years, we have made improvements, but it hasn't been up to par as, until the audit had come out and we realized, all the ineffectiveness and how inadequate we were in the cash handling. Again, as I mentioned, as we moved forward, we did make some improvements prior to the audit coming out.
Well, what bothers me is the $30,000 sitting on the lunchroom table. That's obviously a glaring red flag. And that's been standard practice for years then? Is that what I'm hearing?
I wouldn't say that would be standard practice for years. We didn't have $30,000 sitting on the lunchroom table. We do have a safe that it was in. I'm sorry, I can't answer your question.
So I think I can help. Deanna Sacco, Director of Finance. Before everybody, one of the things is that bus fares were free for a really long time. So there was actually no cash coming in. So, I don't want people to get that the whole 20 years Tiffany's worked for transit, that these errors have been happening. That's not correct. So since we started collecting fares again, it's voluminous. And only recently has this department been added staff. They had a very small staff. I think it was like 6 at one time or something like that. So it really was, we took the fares, they went to the bank counted it, and that's what we deposited. So they really have taken actions to try and improve the system, and they did, but we didn't give them enough staff to make sure that system worked, and that's a big part of it. So I just didn't want everybody to think it's been going on for 20 years. It hasn't.
Okay, well, and thanks for that, Dan. I appreciate the clarification. And where I'm going with the questioning is, Councilman Kanuha raised it, we have a constituency, a community that doesn't trust, and for very valid reasons. And last year, the request for mass transit was 4.7 million. This year it's 14.7, 15.1 or thereabouts. And last year I was against the additional $1 million for buses because just adding buses doesn't fix the problem. And adding more money doesn't fix the problem. We have to have the structure in place. And that's what I'm concerned about. We have a budget challenge ahead of us right now. And trying to figure out the best way to handle that. Unless we have the confidence, we're not going to be able to get forward. And so that's where these questions are coming from. I'll yield at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggles. Anyone else? I'm talking about the vendors. I know we've been talking mostly about how do we fix the internal controls. Now, according to the report, I think Mass Transit works with about 23 vendors. Is that correct? So those are people that we hire to drive the buses? Or on page 18, taxi coupons, bus tickets, and passes that were sold, and there were 7 vendors that owed Mass Transit a total of $29,809 for tickets that were advanced by Mass Transit. And in this entire audit plan, I was just wondering what would be the department's plan to address the vendors' situation. If
They have been in discussions with Corporation Counsel to improve this system. I'm not sure we're ready to share all of that quite yet, but
Okay.
they are working on ways to improve that area. That's kind of a separate area with selling the passes and the taxi coupons and what.
Right.
And some of it had to do with a contractual issue in the past. So
Right, I read that.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, moving forward, given all the input from the council members, I was just wondering whether that would be something that, whether we provide training for the vendors or, whatever you folks implement. I think because your department works with outside, vendors, what would be the plan for training in the new, and I hope there is an interaction between the vendors that we work with and because they deal with money also, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I just wanted to, that would be my only note
Yeah,
or
and just to
question.
clarify, there's 2 separate sets. So one is the vendors that provide drivers.
Right.
And I believe they are working with those particular group. And this other group that also sells passes and whatnot is what they're working with Corporation Counsel to work out a better system.
Right, okay, thank you very much. And I think, other than that, I really want to thank Legislative Auditor Bonnie Nims and her staff, Lane and Max. You guys did an excellent job. This was done on a systematic basis. I don't think we'd be here today, or it would be this, not bad, but concerning. So I want to thank everyone. Director, thank you for coming. And given that, council members, all those in favor of filing communication 920, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have 9 ayes. Thank you very much.